as we enter into this era of AI perfection, right? AI is going to try to make everything absolutely perfect. It's going to be imperfections that give your photos life. Imperfections is going to be the thing that gives humanity to your images, that say this photo was taken by a real human and it matters because it exists. Hey, welcome to the Beginner Photography Podcast. I'm your host, Raymond Hatfield, and today I want to talk about something that I know has been weighing heavily on a lot of hobbyists lately, especially those who have found photography later in life. You know, there's this phrase that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that makes sense for some things. It makes sense for a lot of things. Things like a light bulb. Anybody, whether they're an electrician or not, can tell you whether a light bulb works by flipping the switch. But how can you tell if something is broken and needs fixed when it's subjective, like photography? That is a much harder thing to do, because maybe you picked up a camera because you love the idea of slowing down. You love the idea of seeing the world differently. But somewhere along the way, it all started to feel like work. I've been there. There's this feeling that every photo that we take needs to be perfect. It needs to be edited. It needs to be polished. It needs to be sharpened. It needs to be color graded. It needs to be posted with like this super witty caption. Otherwise, it's not even worth doing. And suddenly, it's not about enjoying the moment anymore with your camera. It's about creating something to fix. So that's what we're going to talk about today. How photography isn't about fixing problems. But first, the Beginner Photography Podcast is brought to you by CloudSpot. With CloudSpot, you can deliver beautiful galleries. You can set up a storefront in minutes and start earning more from each shoot. And you can protect your photos with things like passwords and watermarks on your images. So if you're not using CloudSpot already, I don't know what you're waiting for. Go ahead and grab yourself a free account over at deliverphotos.com now. So it's not a secret. I don't really like editing. I didn't get into photography to become a digital artist. I got into photography to take photos. And when I was growing up, the process of photography was I got usually a disposable camera. I would point, I would shoot. My parents would drop it off at Target, Walmart, Costco, wherever. And then a few days later, I'd get my photos back. And that was it. The process of shooting was fun. And it was relatively quick. Unfortunately, somewhere along the way, between the transition from film to digital, editing became like this default step in the process of photography. And not just for pros, but for everyone. And we see this everywhere with Lightroom presets for sale, YouTube tutorials on how to salvage bad photos, or these TikToks of like wild before and afters. I mean, you're removing these crazy elements and changing the colors and creating this like dynamic light and blurring out the background and making it darker. And it's like, wait, why didn't you just do that in camera when you took the photo? Anyway, all that to say that there's a lot that can be done in camera, but we don't necessarily look at it that way anymore. And it didn't always used to be this way. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that editing is bad, because it's not. I think that editing is pretty great. And I'm also not saying that editing is new. Professional film photographers have always edited their images since the beginning of time. Well, since the beginning of photography, I guess. Photography's time. But it was usually less about fixing a photo and more about finishing a photo. Putting their signature on an image in the darkroom. Dodge here, burn here, some color adjustments. I don't know if you know this, but when you go to print a photo in the darkroom, there are 3 different filters that you can put in front of the light that burns the image onto the enlarged paper, into the enlarged image. And those 3 colored films you use to get the color accurate, to adjust the color in the image. So like these basic edits, I mean, these things have been going on for decades, for 100 plus years. Editing, it is not new. It's not new. Professionals would even do things like object removal, painting on the image. That would be like heavier stuff. It's not just colors. But I would say that most of the creative part of an image was done in camera. And most casual or even hobbyist photographers, film photographers, didn't edit their images at all. Like me, they would shoot a roll of film. They would drop it off at like the 1 hour photo place and then pick up their prints a few days later. And that was it. Done. Finished. Finito. But these photographers, these hobbyists who were just going, shooting, printing a roll, they're not photographers who were worried about whether their photos would win any awards. All that they wanted to do was remember and capture a day at a car show or a vacation with the grandkids or even just something as simple as like a foggy morning walk. Today, though, it feels as if we have reversed that order. Maybe not reverse the order, but like professionals still use editing much, I think, in the same way to enhance their vision, of course. But yeah, it's not reversed. Anyway, a lot of beginners and hobbyists out though now are taught that, and often unintentionally, that you need to edit your photos to make them good. And if you look at a photo and it doesn't pop, or if it's not moody enough, or if it's not vibrant enough, then it's just simply not worth sharing, let alone even keeping. So instead of learning this tool that is your camera, right? The thing that we can physically control for how to achieve these things, a more moody image, a more vibrant image, an image that pops. Instead of doing that, what we do is we just lean on the editing. Because with ease, I mean, you can fix things like exposure mistakes or a weird white balance or poor composition or even cluttered backgrounds. Again, with ease. And I'm not here to shame that. We all do it from time to time. It's invaluable of a resource to have. I honestly cannot imagine the process of doing a head swap for like maybe a family photo because somebody blinked when we were still shooting on film. But when editing becomes a substitute for learning, that's when we run into a problem. And that problem being that we stop growing as photographers in lieu of growing as digital artists. And again, like I didn't get into photography to get into Photoshop and digital arts. I do love those things. I love like looking at them. I love the creative mind that can create from an empty digital space. I truly do. But that's not why I got into photography. So when we stop asking ourselves things like, what do I want this image to say? And start asking, how can I edit this photo to make it look cool? That's the problem. And I don't know. I mean, it must have been because instead of putting instead of having our images in this physical space like we did with film, this tangible thing that we hold in our hand that is in essence done, what we do now with all of our photos is that we load them onto a computer in a digital workspace where we're already accustomed to editing Word documents or writing out email or like creating things, changing things, manipulating digital things. We're very aware and accustomed and comfortable with that. And that once our images got onto computers, it felt like, wait, why don't we do that with our photos as well? I don't think it's like, a big photo. I don't think that's this big problem. I think it just kind of happened naturally and unintentionally. Unfortunately, when that happened, and again, we stop asking ourselves, what do we want this image to say while we're taking the photo? And we start asking ourselves, well, how can I edit this image just to look cool after we've already taken it? Then we slowly stop enjoying the process of shooting and we start dreading the workload of fixing. And by that time, it's too late. That time it is too late because we think that that's what photography is. And what sucks is like when you go out and you're still kind of in that transitional phase where you're trying to learn the camera before you morph into this thing that's like, oh, I'll just fix it in post. What you do is you go out and you shoot 1,000 images of a tree or a flower or like a day at the park. And then when you get back to your computer, again, society now kind of tells us that we must edit our images. We must shoot in RAW, all these things that are just ridiculous. And now we want to save all 1,000 of these photos. And that's the workload of like, I don't really want to do this. And that's not fun. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to dread a hobby, you know? Nobody wants photography to feel more like homework than it is a fun and enjoyable and fulfilling hobby. Nobody wants that. And listen, I'm not saying that I don't edit my images. I do. But I optimize for fun and enjoyment of photography. So, what does that look like? It means that I rarely use Lightroom on my computer anymore because I just love the experience of editing in Lightroom on my iPad. Why? I don't know. I mean, visually they look the same, but there's something about interacting with the images with your fingers and pinching to zoom and using an Apple Pencil. Like it just feels more fun, right? Whether it objectively is or isn't, I don't know, but subjectively it is. So I optimize for that. And I do everything I can to spend as little time in Lightroom as humanly possible. Now, even though that's the case, I can't imagine giving it up. In fact, I find it to be an invaluable resource for photographers. And it's not because it allows me to edit quicker or better. For me, what I love most about Lightroom is the ability to catalog and organize a ever-growing collection of images. I mean, it's always going to grow, right? So to be able to catalog them and know exactly where my photos are at any moment, have them sync across any device everywhere, I love it. I cannot imagine getting rid of it. But that does not mean that you need Lightroom. It does not mean that you need to edit your photos. It doesn't mean that you need to do anything other than putting your photos in a folder on your computer, or better yet, printing them out, right? So we have this idea of what is and is not a photographer. So let me say this like real clearly. You don't need to edit your photos to be a quote unquote real photographer. You don't need to fix every single image for it to be worth keeping. You don't have to keep every single image if you don't want to. And you are allowed to take a photo and look at it and just say, yeah, nice. And not have this pressure that the photo must get a million likes and that you already have some sort of clever caption waiting for it. But you can say, yeah, nice, because a photo simply reflects what you saw and hopefully how you felt in that moment. That is enough. That is enough. Imperfections. Imperfections don't mean that a photo is broken. Early on shooting weddings, I wanted to fix every single photo. I wanted it to look like every photo could be printed in a magazine. Now, when I look back at those photos, I cringe a little bit today, but at the time, I thought that I was doing the right thing. I was smoothing out the skin. I was removing every stray hair because it was kind of windy outside or, whatever. I would go into Photoshop and literally like adjust people's smiles to make them look happier. That happened a lot with kids who, just didn't like to do the family photos or whatever. But I wanted them to be picture perfect. And I achieved that by fixing, quote unquote, every photo. I looked at every photo and asked myself, how can I fix this to make it perfect? But what I learned is that, again, imperfection does not mean that a photo is broken. Sometimes the imperfection is the magic. There's this photo that I have of a flower girl picking her nose, right? While the bride and all the bridesmaids are all standing together, and it's like this really sweet moment, and like they're kind of laughing. And then off to the side is the flower girl picking her nose. And I mean, she's like digging deep, like she's just discovered picking her nose, and she wants to explore every facet of what she can do with this newfound power. That is like what she was doing. I mean, her face was scrunched up. She was really trying to get in there. I could have cropped her out of the photo so that it was just this nice little moment of the bridesmaids with the bride, and that was it. I could have fixed the photo, but I didn't. I shared it as is. I left it as is. Now, of course, in the moment, I took the wide shot with the flower girl in it. And then I also, once I was confident in that shot, I took a step closer and just focused on the bride and the bridesmaid so that they did have the option to have the photo without the, booger searching flower girl in there. But the point is, the image that I shared was the one of the flower girl. I mean, digging real deep. And you know what? That photo is one of my most liked, I want to say liked, but that photo has the most engagement on my Instagram page. And do you know why that is? Because it feels real. It feels authentic. It feels human. It's funny. It's funny in a way that, like, oh man, that's kids. Kids are gross. Jeez. Ugh. I wonder if there was a surprise waiting for the bride when she got down the aisle and the flower girl handed her flowers. You know what I mean? Like, these are the questions that pop up in your head because of this real, authentic, and human moment, even if it is imperfect. And as we enter into this era of AI perfection, right? AI is going to try to make everything absolutely perfect. It's going to be imperfections that give your photos life. It's going to be imperfections that give humanity and give authenticity to our images. Yeah, maybe right now AI has a problem with fingers and, spaghetti or whatever, but like this is the worst that it's going to be. It is continually getting better and better every single day, and it's going to focus on perfection. And hey, I mean, that's great for things like commercial work. That's great for certain type of portraits. That's great for certain types of paid photography. But if you are somebody who wants to use photography as a creative outlet, as a way to slow down and experience the world, as a way to be more present, as a way to document your life, then imperfections is going to be the thing that gives humanity to your images, that say this photo was taken by a real human and it matters because it exists. I think that that's part of the reason why film has seen such a resurgence, because it's perfectly imperfect. Yeah, I mean, you could say for the past 10 years it's been on the rise, but the past like 2 years, holy cow, I mean, hockey stick moment again. And that's because we're now seeing what AI is doing to photography, and people are looking for a way to validate or authenticate that their images are real and that they existed. And film is just, there's no denying it once you see the negative, the physical negative. One of my favorite books, I try to read it every year. It's called The Dude and the Zen Master by Jeff Bridges. And in this book, it's a very short read. It's very enjoyable. It's conversation. Jeff Bridges talks about how he likes to plork on his guitar. Plork. Plork. It is half play, half work. Plork. It's play in the sense that there's no expectations. When he picks up a guitar, no expectations. He's just playing around. But it's work in the sense that he's simply putting in the reps and therefore will become better at it. He's going to be, I don't know, working on his scales, working on his fretting, working on his picking, whatever it is. There's work involved. But within that, he's just playing around. I love that idea. I love that idea. I want you to try to incorporate that the next time you go out and shoot. So next time you go out and shoot, try this. Don't shoot with the goal of fixing or even editing the photos later. Shoot with the goal of getting it right in camera. Not getting everything right in camera, just getting something right in camera. Now, right does not mean, again, perfect. It does not mean, quote unquote, properly exposed. Right means as close to how you see the world as you can. Maybe that's going to be the right moment. Maybe it's going to be the right light. It may not be everything at once, but you're trying to get something right in camera. So it doesn't have to be technically perfect. It doesn't have to be award worthy, but it does have to be intentional. So pay attention to things like the direction of light. Pay attention to where your eye goes within a scene. Pay attention to a moment and composition. The basics, Use your viewfinder more of like a window than a rough draft. And what that means is slow down. Again, take a look at the light. Adjust your exposure. Change your angle. Wait a few seconds. Take the photo, and if it doesn't work, cool. No worries. You learned something. Try again. Right? You're just plorking. You're just plorking. That is such a fun word to say. I used to love saying salsa. Now Plorkin. Aaron Plorkin. I bet he would hate to hear it. Anyway, that is right there the mindset shift, right? Is that you're just Plorkin. You're just playing around while working on something, right? The images that you capture, photography isn't broken and it doesn't need to be saved. Photography simply needs to be enjoyed. In fact, now that I think about it, I got this email this morning. Hold on, let me pull it up. I don't know if you have ever heard of the app Headway. If you haven't, highly recommend it. Headway is like quick book summaries. So you can go through like a whole book in like 15 minutes. It pulls out all like the key points and whatnot. Anyway, one of the quotes that I saved, and then it now emails me these quotes that I've saved within the app Headway. It is that art must bring pleasure and happiness, not necessarily financial success, right? That was by Rick Rubin in the book, The Creative Act. Again, photography doesn't have to be fixed. It doesn't have to be saved. It just simply needs to be enjoyed. So, before I let you go, I want to give you some permission today. You don't need permission. You're an adult. You can do whatever you want, but I'm going to give you some permission anyway. I want to give you permission to shoot in JPEG and skip editing entirely. That doesn't make you any less of a photographer. I want to give you permission to print straight from your camera roll. That doesn't make you any less of a photographer. I want to give you permission to share a photo just because it simply feels right. And even if it's not right in a technical standard, that doesn't make you any less of a photographer. And I want to give you permission to let your camera be the creative tool, not your editing software. That doesn't make you any less of a photographer. In fact, that's the one thing that I would say makes you more of a photographer. I may not know you, but I'd be willing to bet you didn't get into photography to spend more time in front of a screen. You probably got into photography to slow down. You probably got into photography to spend more time outside. Maybe you got into photography because you're not good at drawing or painting, but you can create something with a camera. You got into photography to see the world differently. So go out and see it. Now, if there's one actionable exercise that I can give you to make this whole thing stick, I don't think it's going to surprise you, but it's going to be this. Take 5 photos a day for the next week and commit to not editing any of them. Not because you're trying to prove something. I'm not saying that editing is the enemy. I'm not saying that editing is bad. I edit photos. People edit photos. It's been happening for hundreds of years. But you're doing it because you're practicing seeing again. You're practicing figuring out how you can use this creative tool in your hand that is the camera. 5 photos a day, commit to not editing any of them. Pay attention to what you notice. What patterns emerge? Do you shoot for light? Do you shoot for color? Do you shoot for emotion? Whatever it is, that becomes your artistic signature. That's the thing that makes your work stand out. It's not a Lightroom preset. It's not some image LUT or color grade. It's what you notice in an image. Remember, you're not a machine. Your camera is not broken, and your photos, they don't need fixed. They just need to be yours. That's all that I got for you today. Bit shorter today, but hopefully just as actionable. Hopefully that can give you something to chew on as you go out and shoot next time, to see the world differently as far as your approach to photography. And editing, it's a great tool. But what are you optimizing for? To become a photographer or a digital artist? Choice is yours. No wrong choice, but the choice is yours. So that's all that I got for you today. Until next time, remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon. Thank you for tuning into this week's episode of the Beginner Photography Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Start a conversation. Grow together. That is it for this week. Remember, the more that you shoot today, the better of a photographer you will be tomorrow. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to the Beginner Photography Podcast. Keep shooting, and we'll see you next week.